Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we are digging into Ali Abdaal's book, Feel Good Productivity. If you are just plain tired of fighting that endless losing battle with procrastination, this one is for you. Let's get right into it.
Let's just start right here with this quote because it's so powerful. If you've ever felt like all that common productivity advice just doesn't click for you, well, you're not alone. And more importantly, you are not lazy. This idea really gets to the heart of why the usual approach so often fails.
For decades, really, we've been told there are basically two ways to beat procrastination. You either use the motivation method or you use the discipline method. We've all been there, right? Trying to psych ourselves up to want to do the thing or just trying to power through with pure grit.
But here's the thing. Those are just band-aids. They only treat the symptoms. The fact that you're not taking action, but they never ever stop to ask why. What's the real underlying cause of that resistance? And this is where Abdaal suggests we need a completely new way of looking at the problem. And that brings us to the absolute core of feel-good productivity. Abdaal calls it the unblock method. And trust me, this is where the entire mindset really starts to shift.
So, here's the crucial point. Procrastination isn't some failure of your willpower. No, it's actually a direct result of the negative emotions we've attached to our work. The unblock method is all about figuring out what those feelings are and then dealing with them first. And this analogy just illustrates the whole idea perfectly. Abdaal says, look, if running hurts because you have a pebble in your shoe, the answer isn't to just grit your teeth and run harder through the pain. No, the obvious solution is to stop for a second, take off your shoe, and get that darn pebble out. So simple, right? So what are these pebbles he's talking about? Well, Abdaal identifies three main emotional blockers that get in our way and cause procrastination. So let's take a look at each one and a really simple way to remove it.
All right, so the first blocker is uncertainty. So often, we put things off simply because we're not totally sure what we're supposed to be doing. It creates this kind of fog of uncertainty, as he calls it.
And this confusion leads to something scientists actually call uncertainty paralysis. When that path forward is all foggy and unclear, our brains they freeze up. And the fix for this isn't a more complicated, detailed plan, it's actually a much clearer purpose. To clear away that fog, he suggests we use a concept from the US military called commander's intent. It's all about asking one simple question before you do anything. What is the purpose behind this? Just understanding the big picture why can make the how a whole lot easier to figure out.
Now, what's really cool is seeing how this works in real life. For years, Abdaal kept failing to stick with his goal of going to the gym. But when he asked himself why, he realized his purpose wasn't actually to get a six-pack. It was just to be healthy, fit, and strong. And suddenly, that made the whole task feel way less intimidating.
Okay, let's move on to the second blocker. And boy, is it a big one. Fear. We all have this threat detector in our brain, the amygdala, and it can completely hijack our rational thoughts. It makes us afraid of rejection or judgment or failure, sometimes before we even start. A huge source of this fear comes from something called the spotlight effect. It's this mistaken, but very common, belief that everyone around us is constantly watching and judging our every single move. Abdaal tells this great story about making a really terrible joke at a dinner party and just feeling completely humiliated, but when he asked his friend about it later, his friend didn't even remember it happening. The liberating truth is, people are way too busy with their own lives to be focused on your stumbles. Realizing this, really internalizing it, can be so incredibly free. All right, the third and final blocker is inertia. Just like Isaac Newton's first law of motion says, an object at rest tends to stay at rest. And honestly, it takes so much more energy to just get started than it does to keep going. That initial push is the emotional hump we have to get over. And probably the simplest way to do that is with the 5-minute rule. The hardest part of any task is just starting, so make the start ridiculously small. Make it totally non-threatening. And here's what's so wild about this little trick. Once you've overcome that initial friction, you'll probably find that about 80% of the time, you just keep going. You've gotten the object in motion, and now it's way easier to keep it moving. So when you put this all together, you get this system that's all about shifting your focus. Instead of trying to force yourself to be productive, you work on feeling good about the task first. And that feeling good is what naturally leads to getting things done. It's a complete flip of the old way of thinking. And this is basically your toolkit. It's a simple but really powerful system. So instead of fighting yourself, you just pause, identify the emotional blocker that's getting in your way, and then you apply the right tool to gently remove it. It's about working with your brain, not against it. And that really just leaves us with a final thought. Procrastination isn't some deep character flaw, it's just a signal. It's your emotions trying to tell you that something's not quite right. So the real question is, what's your procrastination trying to tell you today?